mute les choses.
We're just going to give people another minute to arrive and then we'll get started. Welcome to this nice big crew. I think we have folks from all over the place too, which is a good thing.
Yeah, welcome everyone.
So I want to welcome everyone to this jointly hosted webinar with the American Sociological Association, Sociological Practice and Public Sociology section, and the Association for Applied and Clinical Sociology. These two groups have some overlap and some distinct groups in our memberships, but a lot of us have worked together for a while, so it's nice to be co-hosting this event. My name is Melissa Fry. I'm the president of the Association for Applied and Clinical Sociology, and I want to thank Mitchell Henry, who is sort of hosting our webinar today from Indiana University Southeast, just outside Louisville. He will be making sure we get it recorded so that people can access this on both the SPPS website and the AACS website for future reference, or if you have other people that you know might be interested, you can refer them to one of those websites to watch the recording. I also want to thank Rachel Ivie for agreeing to present to us. Rachel's name came to us through someone who's a member of both organizations and has worked outside of academia quite a bit himself. And Augie Diana recommended her as a good person for talking about resumes for jobs outside the academy. We know that both of our groups have a substantial audience of people shifting careers, or of students and graduate students seeking employment outside of academia and trying to figure out how best to put together their resume for sociology. So we appreciate everybody joining us for this. I'm going to turn hosting over to Karen Albright, who is the chair, this year's chair of the ASA section on sociological practice and public sociology. Kind of take things from here, but thank you all for coming. We're happy to have you.
Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate that. And just as Melissa said, welcome to everybody. We are so pleased to be here today and host this event collaboratively. And I am so pleased to be able to introduce our speaker, Rachel Ivie. So Rachel is a senior research fellow at the American Institute of Physics. And she's had a 23-year career at AIP, where she has worked with the Statistical Research Center, and she recently served there as director. She received her PhD in sociology from UNC Chapel Hill. And when she was there, she specialized in research methods, statistics, and gender. So it seems like a logical direction from her doctoral work. And while she's been at AIP, she's studied the careers of physicists and astronomers, and particularly the careers of women in those fields. So she's designed and carried out numerous studies, from a global study of scientists outlining gender differences in career progress, to a longitudinal study of astronomy graduate students that explains the factors that may make women more likely to leave the field. She's also a fellow of the American Astronomical Society. So we're pleased to have her here. As you know from the description of the talk, she's going to be sharing a little bit about her own career journey, but particularly using that to place into context some tips and observations and strategies that she's learned over the course of her career in terms of searching for and then working within fields as a sociologist, fields that are outside the sort of typical faculty position associated with academic sociology. Now we will have time reserved at the end of this webinar for Q&A. I'm sure you'll have many questions for Rachel, but please feel free to hold your questions until the end. But you can also write them in the chat as they occur to you if you don't want to lose them. And then we will return to them at the end of the talk so that we can have a more robust discussion of everything all together. Please also be sure to mute your mics if you are not speaking, and so we won't have any worries with background noise. I also want to give a little shout out before we officially begin to a future and upcoming SPPS offering. Our next professional development webinar is going to be actually a workshop on writing and pitching op-eds. And that's going to be held on Wednesday, July 21st, 2 to 3:30 Eastern. And it's going to be led by the Scholars Strategy Network. So if you're interested in similar webinars and workshops, please consider being an SPPS member. And AACS also has a number of really attractive offerings. So if you're not already an AACS member, please consider joining that as well. And with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic and the floor over to Rachel. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you, Karen and Melissa. Thank you for the invitation and for the great introduction. Let me just give me like a second or two to share my screen, get organized here. switch over to full screen for my PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, I'm super excited to be here today. I do have a confession to make, and that is my name is Rachel, and I'm a non-academic sociologist. So I just want to put that out there to let everyone know. Of course, that's why you're here, right? But you know, that comes from my context of you heard where I went to graduate school, and you know, I wasn't supposed to end up here. Although my advisor herself had worked outside of academics for a while, we were told that the expectation was that we would be professors. I mean, that's really what the faculty members knew. They were replicating themselves. We were there to, you know, get jobs at the best possible university that we could. And most of all, we were expected to contribute to the sociological literature. So contributing to the sociological literature is important, but it's not what I do. And I'll talk more about that later. Speaking of publishing, when I was in grad school, it was preferable, and it may still be, to have a single author publications, right? You know, it's like, oh, so-and-so got a single author publication in the ASR. I didn't like working by myself. I still don't. In fact, I kind of hate it. And that fact, keep that in mind, has been important in my career decisions. I like collaborative work a whole lot. Another thing that's been important in my career decisions is that I've been frustrated by the fact that sociological research done the academic way is usually only seen by other sociologists. So the people that we study never actually see the results of our work. Now, I work with people, specifically physicists, and we could spend some time making jokes here about physicists and their social skills, but I won't. Who they read scholarly literature, right? They contribute to the scholarly literature, but not ours. In fact, some of them seem not to be aware that our scholarly literature exists, and most of them don't know how to find it. I did have an astronomer once, I gave a seminar in the astronomy department, asked me how he could find sociological literature. So it seemed kind of not to know that his colleagues across the campus had gotten tenure based on doing research, just like he did. So, but physicists aren't totally clueless. They look around themselves and they see problems that they want to fix, but they're not in physics. They're social problems. And they try to fix problems, but one of the things that I've been focusing on is people's awareness that physics is the field, the science that has the lowest representation of women. It's only 20% still. So they look around and they notice, gosh, there's not a lot of women, and there's also not a lot of people from minoritized groups. And they want to fix this, but they have no idea how. It hadn't occurred to them that they have colleagues at the university who may be able to help them. We could blame these physicists and astronomers for being ignorant of our work, or we could look at ourselves. How much of our good work is seen only by other sociologists? That's a rhetorical question. So that's part of the reason why I work outside of academics. I want to do research that other people actually use. What I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be talking about my own experiences as a PhD sociologist, but I just wanted to put out the caveat that, well, a lot of what I say applies to bachelor's level people too. So if you happen to be an undergraduate student, great, you're welcome here. My company hires people with bachelor's degrees in sociology and does, you know, they make good money and do great. So I am going to start though with my personal experience and talk to you about how I got here, because I want to kind of normalize the relationship between work and the rest of your life and let you know that that's important, and just kind of normalize the experience of working outside academics. How did I get here? I used to think of it as something I had done that wasn't too good. I kind of blamed myself and thought maybe it was my personal life. I had gotten divorced in graduate school. It was not my choice, and so that was a traumatic event for me. But then I also got remarried in grad school. And when my husband was toward the end of grad school, my new husband got a job in Texas at a research university. I got a postdoc in Michigan. So we'd been married less than a year and we were already looking at a long distance relationship. I had to think carefully about what to do. I called the professor's postdoc, the one who was leaving at Michigan, and I asked her, how many single author publications am I going to get out of this? And she said, none. So I decided not to go to Michigan, which of course killed my academic career, and I knew it. I got to Texas, and I'm originally from Texas, so that was part of my rationale. And I was in a rural area. I got a job at a full-time job teaching at a two-year college, which I actually really liked. I had great colleagues there and some great students. But my husband, as a mathematician, throughout mathematics, there's a political dispute between the applied mathematicians and the pure mathematicians. My husband was an applied mathematician. He was doing okay, but he just hated the infighting. So we left and got jobs at a four-year college in West Virginia where I hated it. I had no colleagues. I was the only sociologist. My husband was there, but I was the only sociologist. I worked almost constantly. I had a 3-year-old son. I got up, I graded all weekend. I taught research methods. I got up and changed the laundry and, gave him his chicken nuggets and then went right back to work. I didn't, like I said, I had no colleagues. It was like death. I had some friends from grad school who worked at consulting firms in Washington, D.C., which is where I'm located now. And they said to me, why don't you look for a job up here? So I did. And I left academics. That was more than 20 years ago. It was only about halfway through my career when I was asked to talk about my career at the ASAs that I began to think about, was going into academics something that I had really wanted to do? Because I began to think maybe it wasn't totally my personal life and all these family things, although that's really important. I began to think maybe I never really wanted to do it. It's top secret, okay? As a UNC graduate, we got to keep that secret. Not really, but I have to keep it secret. I don't think they care. Then that was kind of hard to admit, that the thing I had thought I was being trained for, had never really wanted to do after spending all those years in grad school. When I finished my dissertation, I imagined I would go to a department, a sociology department, set up a research program, work alone, trying to get some grants, hopefully be able to get a student and publish my single author publications. And it just, now in retrospect to me, it doesn't sound very good. When I got my non-academic job at a nonprofit, I got a 50% pay increase and I worked a lot less. So nonprofit salaries are not known to be high, but in a lot of cases they beat academics. So my work-life balance improved and I was a lot happier. I'll talk to you about some more about what I like about my job toward the end. Here are my job functions, things that I have done over the years. I spent a lot of time managing surveys. We do both web and mail surveys, primarily web now, but still some paper surveys. We take contracts and clients want to do a survey project or focus groups or something like that. We have people in our office now that do focus groups and qualitative, and we make sure that they get the data they need to answer questions. Sometimes clients don't know, how to design a questionnaire to make sure it gives them the results they need. We write proposals for grants and contracts. I report out to the scientific community. I give a lot of talks. I've also done budgeting and department management. And, you would do that if you were in academics, you would do that as part of managing your grants. So in other words, I do all the things that sociologists do. I just don't do them at an academic department. Here's another list of my substantive topics and my methodological expertise. Even in grad school, I was studying women in male-dominated careers, and I continue to do that in physics. I've become the go-to person for women in physics. My career-making moment was when I had a report on women in physics covered in the New York Times and on NPR. When I first started studying women in physics, I just collected statistics, like how many are there at different levels. But now I've been able to go beyond that to start documenting the inequality that people experience in fields like physics, like access to resources and opportunities. Are there gender differences? Are there differences for people from marginalized groups? I've also studied careers. Karen mentioned my study of my longitudinal study of astronomy graduate students. It's about their career histories and who's more likely to work in the field of astronomy and physics after going to grad school. So my methodology expertise is I collect data from organizations, especially from physics departments, which is a little bit different than collecting it from individuals. I'm an expert on visual design of questionnaires and on increasing response rate. When I first got to my company, I was assigned to a survey that had a 70% response rate, which is great. It's one of the department surveys, but I got the response rate up to 90% where it still stays. Now our individual surveys don't get that high of a response rate, but I've been able to do, like I said, I have all the functions and expertise and interests of a sociologist, and I do sociology, but not for publication in sociology journals. Now I could publish in sociology journals in the sense that my employer would allow it. They don't encourage it, but they would allow it. I publish, though, my results where people are going to see it, and that's either in physics publications or journals or in science journals, general science. If publishing in sociology journals is important to you, you might want to stay in academics. I wanted to talk to you about, I already made that point, how I made my resume. You are going to need a resume for a non-academic job. It's different from a CV. Nobody wants to see a list of all your presentations in non-academic jobs. What they want to see is a list of your skills. And these are the skills I listed on my very first resume. And they are mostly methodological skills. After each skill on my resume, I listed a description of how the evidence that I knew those things, like what I had done in relationship to data analysis, the kinds of data analysis I could do, just to kind of show, this is what I mean by data analysis. I'll show you an example of that in a minute on my current resume. When I first went on the job market in non-academic jobs, I listed training. And I don't have that on there anymore, but what I put was that I had taught research methods. And you could put something similar, even if you haven't taught research methods, you could put like, you've worked with students. It's a kind of training. It ended up being good that I had put that on there. My employer was interested in it. When I got there, I supervised people and I worked with people who didn't know as much as I did about data collection. So I did training, just not of students. I put this toolbox here because as sociologists, we have a methodological toolbox. And it's all the things that we've learned, ways to collect data and ways to do research. And we can apply that toolbox to any problem. So it didn't matter when I got to the American Institute of Physics that I didn't know anything about the sociology of science. They didn't care. I had this methodological toolbox that would fit right into their existing data collection efforts. So what we all have as sociologists is this methodological toolbox, this way of solving problems that it can be of great value to employers outside of academics. Let me show you my resume. This is from my current resume. You should actually have more than one version of your resume adjusted for the specific job. This is one that emphasizes my research skills. So you can see here, I've still got research design, what I did years ago, survey project management, what I've done in that area. This one has some of my management expertise at the bottom. I just applied for a job that doesn't require management, so I took these bullets off. It's not necessary. Sometimes people ask me about data analysis. It's not necessary to be able to, at a PhD level, to be able to use certain packages, like statistics packages. So unless the ad says we need you to be able to program in R or SPSS, you don't have to put that on there because at a PhD level, you're going to be probably supervising someone who does that for you. So it's like your ready-made research assistant is going to be working there with you. You don't need to stick to 1 or 2 pages. If you have a PhD, I think mine is like onto the 3rd page. I do have some of my publications, but I put the ones that are relevant to the job that I'm applying for. Let's see, communication. That's one you should almost always have on there as a skill, because a lot of times people who do surveys under contract, they just run the output. You know, here's your 400 SPSS tables. Their contract, contract is ended. But the problem with that is a lot of the clients don't know how to interpret those tables. I mean, you may think, well, gosh, anybody can interpret a table, but you'd be surprised. So sociologists, one of the skills that we have is the ability to take a great deal of information, synthesize it, and convey it in a way that's meaningful to people. And so you too can put that as one of your skills. You're going to need a cover letter. Sometimes people don't include cover letters, and as someone who's hired a lot of people, that's always a mistake. The cover letter should address specific issues raised in the ad. How do you fill their needs? You should be at the beginning saying, I'm a sociologist, or I have sociological training, and I can do these things and bring immediate value to your organization. If you're applying for a job that's far away from where you're currently physically located, unless it says remote only, you want to address that you're willing to relocate if you are, because I've read cover letters just before the pandemic especially, and I'm thinking, do they know that this job is in Maryland and they're in Florida? How are they going to get here? See, my employer is still going to require people to live within commuting distance, even when the pandemic restrictions are completely lifted. So if you're applying for a long distance job, you need to mention that in the cover letter. You may, and now in academics, it's typical at the PhD level to have your expenses paid for a job interview. That sometimes happens, but you shouldn't expect it. So you may have to, offer to pay for an interview yourself, travel there, maybe stay with a friend or something, Airbnb, because that's not always necessarily a thing in non-academic jobs. Let's see. I want to talk about LinkedIn next. I am not by any means a LinkedIn expert. I'm not going to try to act like I am. I recently decided to start looking again and see what's out there in terms of jobs that I could do. And so I wanted to talk, you can Google, and there's a lot of tips on how to use LinkedIn. And you can Google that, and I encourage you to do so. LinkedIn is essential for non-academic jobs. I think every employer will go to your LinkedIn page to try to see what you have there. So what I want to talk about is some things that I've noticed in using LinkedIn that are specific to how we may be looking as sociologists. So one just kind of general tip is that you can customize your URL. So it'll assign you a URL that has, like, I don't know, part of your name and some numbers. You can go in there and, change it so it's your name, which I was able to get my name, so that's good. You want to make sure you use a picture that represents something that is important to you or reflects who you are. This is a picture from a Women in Physics conference. It's an international conference that I went to before the pandemic, and I just like all these women physicists gathered there. Don't let make sure you get a good picture of yourself. LinkedIn will put like a profile stick figure picture here, but you want to go ahead. The pictures are important. This here is called the headline in the circle here, and it'll default to your job title. Now, my job title is Senior Research Fellow, which tells potential employers nothing. It doesn't tell them what my skills are or what I can do. So I thought really hard about how I wanted to present myself in these 2 lines, because this is the first thing that people are going to see, and you want to kind of, hook them in with what your specialty is. So I've got the things that I can do, and then one of my substantive areas. This is my skills, my list of skills. LinkedIn allows you to have a list of skills, and I need to work some on mine. You can also get people to endorse your skills if they know you and know that you can do data collection. Then they can, endorse that and say, yes, I know she can do that. Up at the top, I've got, you can choose the 3 most important skills. So you need to think carefully about what that's going to be, because when someone looks at your LinkedIn page, they're only going to see those top 3 unless they click see more. So you be careful about which 3 you pick. I've got, let's see if I can see it here, survey research, reporting and analysis, and team leadership. You can type in anything to the skills and it'll let you put it up here, but it cuts it off. Okay. So you have to keep it short, which means you can't really explain, like I did on my resume, what you know about data collection. Like down here, what I mean by it cuts it off, this is qualitative and quantitative research methods. Well, I mean, I think people know that it's methods and not something else. But you know, it cuts it off. So this is just a short thing that you have, a short way to put some of your skills. You also can reorder them, but the way that within each category, but the way the categories are set up is kind of goofy. Like it says industry knowledge here, and then it's got web-based surveys under other. Go figure. I can't move web-based surveys up into here. So what I still did on LinkedIn was there's an about section, and I listed my skills out here. Again, very similar to my resume. This one has my management at the top, and I've noticed that the jobs I've applied for recently have not really been management jobs. So I think I'm going to go reorder these and put research at the top. So I wanted to be able to say more about my skills, and I did that because LinkedIn skills section doesn't really work that way. You also have to think carefully about the first 3 lines in your about section, because that's what people see when they get to your page. It's only if they click see more that they would see the rest of it. I feel that it's okay in this to be, so up here I put some of my main skills and my substantive areas. And then in this paragraph, I kind of tell my story, right? These are the kind of things I have done, some of the things I've already told you. And I even put something that's kind of self-revealing, because I don't think that hurts. You know, why is someone who's been at AIP for more than 20 years looking for a job? Well, there was a strategic organization at my company. And I don't say I'm looking for another job in that sentence. I just say, you know, there was a reorg. So to some people, that's like code for, oh, we might want to, you know, that might be why she's looking for a job. So it doesn't hurt to put something like that, like I'm just finishing up in grad school or whatever, that would explain why you're on the market at this time. Let me show you, you can go in LinkedIn and say that you're open to work, and you can either make that public or you can have only recruiters see it. Mine is set to only recruiters. If it's public, you get a big circle on your name that says open to work. But only recruiters can see mine. This is one thing where I thought LinkedIn is kind of limiting. You can't type in any job title that you want. These are ones that it has. And so these are ones that it will try to match you with if a recruiter's looking. But I can't just pick anything. Like one of my former titles was director of research or something like that. But the closest I could get was research and evaluation. I don't really do evaluation research. I mean, there's lots of evaluation jobs out there for sociologists. So this is kind of a stretch, but it was the closest I could come. You can also use LinkedIn to do job searches. My job search, and I think it's kind of an aggregator, so it puts together a lot of jobs from a lot of places. My searches now are set to sociologists actually and survey research. So, you know, every so often, probably too often, I get emails, new job openings in those categories. So let me talk to you less about LinkedIn and more about what my employer was interested in. I've already hinted at that. I had a variety of research projects in undergrad and graduate school. I did mostly quantitative, but I was also qualitatively trained. I worked on longitudinal data in grad school, data collection, secondary data analysis. And then when I became a professor, I taught research methods, and they were very interested in that. But my employer did not hire me for my dissertation topic. They were not interested in my substantive area. Some employers are. They want you to be a subject matter expert, and there's a lot of, for example, jobs for people in sociology of education. But I find that those jobs really aren't for me, because I just want to solve a problem. I don't care what the substantive area is, because I like doing sociological research. I consider it a challenge to go in and learn about a new topic area and create a good survey about it. I've had to learn a lot about the sociology of science and physics in specific. Like I can now make jokes about the textbooks that physicists use in undergrad, which actually they haven't changed in more than 30 years. So that's kind of an inside joke. So I just want you to know that, again, the toolbox, the sociological toolbox is very important. Let's talk about how I found my job and how you too can look for a job. I actually found my job at the end of 1997. And, you know, I've worked there a long time, but I have gotten other offers and decided to stay. One time they gave me a counter offer and increased my salary a whole lot in order to stay. But anyway, it's not like I've never looked for jobs. So on the internet at the end of 1997, it was more like a classified ad. Like I looked actually at the Washington Post, where jobs were still listed in the newspaper more than they are now. Some of the search terms that you can use are survey research or evaluation. That's one that I use. Statistics, if you're quantitatively oriented, but you got to be careful. A lot of them mean more mathematical statistics than you might do. Social science is a good one. And you can search by job title. I'll come back to social science in a minute. Some of the job titles that we use around here are things like research manager, research director, survey manager, or director. At a PhD level, you might be looking for something that's called a research associate. They would actually be carrying out studies. A research analyst is a little bit lower level. So maybe someone with a bachelor's degree would be doing SPSS scripting or whatever the software is that that company has. Sociology and social science are good search terms for government jobs, because government jobs usually have an education requirement, and a lot of them list sociology as one way to meet the education requirement. There's a lot of opportunities in metropolitan areas, some at professional societies, like I'm in a professional society. There's a lot of research firms though. There's some that are for-profit, some that are not for-profit, some that are employee-owned. And then, like I already mentioned, the government job. The government jobs it's a big employer for people with social science. Let me close up here by talking to you about what's great about my job. I get to set my own research agenda. Now that's within boundaries. I can't decide, I mean, I have to do something that's related to my employer's mission. But since I'm interested in gender and careers and things like that, that's fine with me. I can't suddenly decide to go do participant observation on gamblers. They're not going to pay me to do that. But I'm really, and like I said, I'm really more a fan of methodology. So it's all been okay for me. I never work alone. I have a ready-made research group. The day I got there, I had a research analyst who was there to support me and do statistics runs and, you know, manage my data sets for me. I've gotten to travel a lot. I've given talks in Europe, Africa, South America, and Asia. I was scheduled for Australia, but that got canceled due to COVID. Now I get to give it anyway at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning because of the time difference, but hey, that's okay. I've even done a seminar at the Large Hadron Collider, which is called CERN in Switzerland. And I may be the only sociologist who can say that. Large Hadron Collider is really cool, by the way. My work, most importantly, my work is used by the people I'm studying. I've gotten a lot of, you know, I've had a lot of people actually use the data that we produce and a lot of requests to get more data. You know, can I use your data? What about this? Can you come give a talk? That's really fulfilling for me. And it's most of the reason why I keep doing what I do. This is my goodbye slide here. Well, I mean, we have time for discussion, but here's my contact information. You can contact me either at my work email or at my Gmail. If you want me to look at something specific on your resume, you can email me about that, or we can answer general questions in the discussion part. And then, like you've already seen, there's my LinkedIn if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to take whatever questions that you have.
Rachel, thank you so much. That was so engaging and interesting and useful, and I'm sure inspiring to many people who are listening and trying to map out the way that they want their careers to move and explore different options. There are a couple questions in the chat that have there's been some dialogue about around tips and strategies, and we can turn to those in a minute, although there's already been some discussion about them. For now, I wanted to ask you to get us started in a deeper kind of way, whether there is uh, whether there is some way to sell the sociological perspective specifically. You know, you talk a lot about research methods and the benefits of those, and I found that certainly in my own work. So I really hear and recognize the importance of that. But as a genuine curiosity, would you say that there's something about the sociological perspective that has benefited you in your work, or you were able to emphasize as you were searching for jobs, or is it really primarily, you know, the methodological skill set?
Well, that's a great question, Karen. Thank you for asking that. And it does, my emphasis on methodology does come a lot from my story, but I guess one thing I didn't really talk about is how my perspective on, you know, what we might call the sociological perspective or even the sociological imagination, how that's changed in my, for me in my work over the course of my career. Part of my de-emphasis of that is that I've worked with physicists who only recently have begun to acknowledge that sociologists might have something to say of importance. And I have to say that last summer's events have even heightened their awareness. Some of them still think that social science is not science at all. You know, probably 10 years ago, I had someone say that to my face. And and she was on an outside advisory committee for my department, and I couldn't believe it. But I do think that physicists are more open to that now. So I think, there's the way I think about my work as part of the sociology, part of sociology, and then the way I present that externally. And so the way I think about it internally is that I have a perspective that physicists especially don't have. Like when I was working in management in my company, I was able to see things like as an organizational whole that other people aren't necessarily trained to look for, or they have to go to, MBA school and don't come out with as good a background in it as we do. So I think part of it is looking at things as systems, looking at organizations as, things that function. Those kind of have informed my career. Also, just my emphasis on social justice and diversity. That's part of the reason why I like doing diversity work. I think that opportunities have been limited for people in the sciences because of their intrinsic statuses, and so that's also kept me motivated to keep working. But I think it's just now externally where physicists have been able to hear things like that and been able to say, oh yes, there are social scientists and we can learn from them. We don't have to derive everything from first principles. That's like a physics joke where they think there's this list of first principles and you can derive everything from that. Well, actually you can't. But so I don't know. I hope that answers your question, Karen, but I think my emphasis on methodology in the job search, I think, has come from years of working around people who, although I had it in my head, I was doing sociology, I couldn't really talk about it to them. But I think that's changing now, especially the astronomers. They're at least 25 years ahead of the physicists in recognizing that sociologists can contribute to increasing diversity and things like that they're interested in their field.
That's wonderful, Rachel. You definitely did answer my question. And just to be super clear, though, do you now articulate what you just articulated there to employers or potential employers, or do you just, or is it more tacit, and that's one of the ways you contribute to your work environment once you're in it?
As someone applying for a job, I do go ahead and say I'm a sociologist. And I try to talk about how my sociological training would be related to the job they're asking for. And in my current job, I introduced myself as a sociologist, not quite the same way I did today, but I do get up and say I'm a sociologist. Now, my boss before me, he was an excellent boss. That's one of the reasons why I stayed there so long. He's retired now. He tried to pass. He actually had a master's in psychology and never wanted to admit that. But I'm out there and I'm proud of my sociological training. I think that has given me an advantage of with the physicists. Physicists are very proud of being physicists, and I think sociologists have some of that arrogance too, right? And at least I do. And so I think that's helped me, deal with them over the years. So yeah, I talk about it, so.
Terrific. Thank you, Rachel. One new question that's come in just a few minutes ago is whether you have any tips on how a PhD student might translate teaching experience. What skills would you emphasize, and what have you emphasized in terms of teaching specifically?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, I put training on, and it was really a good fit for me because I taught research methods. Well, I mean, I also taught intro and social problems and all that. But even if you haven't taught research methods, you could talk about that as, training and communication skills. You would be surprised at how important communication skills are to employers. Sometimes they get people to do data analysis who just can't communicate to anyone. And like I said, they just hand you a big stack of SPSS output and, no one knows what to do with it. So I would talk about, the number of students that you worked with. If you have had them do any kind of research in your classes, talk about that. So talk about it in terms of communication and training is what I would do.
Excellent. Another question that's come in is, what advice do you have for qualitative researchers with little to no quant experience outside of coursework?
I've noticed, just like in sociology, when I was in grad school, quantitative was king, right? And I used that male phrase on purpose. Quantitative was king. And I noticed in sociology that there's a swing now toward more qualitative, and I think that's happened in the non-academic world as well. We've hired people who do qualitative research. They also do some quantitative, but I think there are employers out there who are looking for people who can do qualitative research. I have a dear friend who runs focus groups. She's a qualitative researcher and runs focus groups. And she just got a new job running focus groups. She was in management, didn't like it, and was able to go back into just doing focus groups. So again, you just emphasize your skills.
Great. Another question on a little bit different element is somebody said a session at Beyond the Professoriate conference last week discouraged skills-based resumes, saying that they're outdated and combination resumes are better. And this person is wondering if you could speak to the difference there.
What kind of resume?
Combination resumes.
I don't know what that term means. So if the question asker can put that in the chat, I could probably decipher the question, or I could Google it real quick. But I've heard that skills are de-emphasized now. I know that you're not supposed to put an objective on there anymore. I still think, and this also comes from working with people with physics bachelor's degrees, I think it pays to at least talk about your skills, because people don't know what sociology is. Just like they often don't know what physics is. So see, sometimes I give talks to physics students about finding jobs, which is ironic. They don't know what it is, so they want to know what is that. My dad's like in his 80s, and I still think he doesn't know what it is. So imagine you're writing it for some ancient relative. Maybe not that bad, but you got to say, what, as a sociology graduate, what can you do? Now, whether or not you want to put a label on that says skills, that's probably up to some resume guru or something. Let me see if it's gotten in the chat.
Yeah, there's somebody just I think the original poster said they weren't sure either what it meant. But there's someone who just put a link in the chat, the very most recent comment to maybe a definition of combination resumes. But maybe Rachel, good.
Oh, on this link, I'm sorry to interrupt, Karen. It has, you still put your contact information. They still have a summary statement, which mine is a lot shorter than this example. They still have a list of skills and a work history. So it says it's a combination of a chronological resume, that's more like what a CV is, because you'll start with here are my academic credentials in order. Here are my publications in order. And a functional resume is like skills based. And I think mine probably is a combination of that, because you saw my skills section, and right after that, I have my work experience, and under each job title that I have, I've listed out, my functions and my skills for that job.
And I think, so one comment I had made in reaction to that was, I know that like in consulting, they usually write a brief description of like their roles on a particular project. And this is kind of what Augie just put in the chat, that you can talk about your skills in direct relation to project areas you've worked on. So, he put, quote, use statistical training in developing a survey and completing the data entry, analysis, and reporting on X project. So I think the way that you present your skills is through very short descriptions of research experience work. So it gives people some context for the kind of role you have played in projects or in particular positions. And I think that's the combination is that it's where you're sort of mixing experience and skills in the way that you present it.
I am opening my current resume, and I'm going to share the screen and scroll down, so you can see an example of exactly what Augie's talking about. Let me go back over here and share the screen. I've got it open now. Hope that's okay, because I think this is what they're talking about. So here's my skills, right? You saw those on my slide. And then like current title, and here's the things that, I want to emphasize: integrative analysis, disseminating results. Here's some of the things like when I was a manager, implemented organizational strategy, the programs I managed, some metrics, like, a lot of places want to see metrics with my budget and my number of employees. So I think this is what they're talking about. Melissa's nodding her head yes. Oh, she's on mute though.
Sorry, it's sort of along the same lines. Like that's one way to do it. There are a couple different layouts for how it looks. There's lots of resources for this available online, but yes, this is it. And there are a couple different ways you can do it, but this is the kind of thing I think current resume building is looking like, as opposed to just a list, which it's clear you include sort of both, that you have these skills and here's how you've developed and used these skills.
Yeah, and all of this is also on my LinkedIn. So, for LinkedIn, I actually, even though I've been at the same employer for a long time, I've listed it out as different jobs. So for each job, because my jobs have changed a lot, for each job, I listed out the things that I did. And here's some things down here at the bottom that I don't know if y'all can see it, but it says usability and visualization improvements in the dissemination of data. So, I mean, that sounds like fancy for, we figured out how to do interactive charts. So, making charts, I've seen job ads for people want those who can make display data in charts. You'd be surprised at the basic skills that you have that employers are looking for, because not everybody can do it. So let me stop the share.
Rachel, thank you for that. And I would add too, with I feel like I'm plugging SPPS a lot, but I will say in the upcoming ASA program, we are having a session devoted explicitly to or exclusively to data visualization. So you may be able to, improve skills or develop skills through that a little bit.
And for those going to, we'll also have a storytelling with data workshop at AACS in October.
Yeah, I subscribe to that blog. Probably everybody on this call knows about it, but it's been very useful. I'm also going to be at the ASAs, but talking about my global survey of scientists, not how to find a job. So I'm super excited about that. And because I'm going to be talking about how, to answer Karen's earlier question, how as a sociologist, I've been bringing like the sociological perspective to try to end the inequality that we see in the sciences.
Fantastic. That sounds great, Rachel. Another question that's come in is someone who says, I recently transitioned from the business environment and I'm now working on my master's in sociology. Where would you suggest getting familiar with the type of jobs that are out there that are non-academic? And I think, Rachel, certainly, I'm sure you have many contributions here. Melissa, you probably do as well. I'll also say that one of the functions of the SPPS listserv, which is a service to members, is to promote those kind of jobs, like, non-academic jobs that are out there and targeted at the sociological skill set. But
Yeah,
Rachel and Melissa, yeah.
I was just going to add that I think that's great. And I was going to add, like, you can, if you don't want to get a LinkedIn account yet, that's fine. You can go to Google to search for jobs and you can start. I mean, some of those, like, they're aggregators. And so some of them you kind of like, you go to the company's website and that job's not really there. So you got to be careful, but you can start seeing like what people are looking for just by Googling something easy like, social science or social science research in their jobs section. So, but you can also use LinkedIn or Indeed or any of the job search sites.
Great. And Katie Gordon, who is another person who's spanned both organizations, she's currently a member of the SPPS Council and is the incoming secretary of AACS, also mentions that on the SPPS website, we've also started a list of the types of organizations that hire sociologists that is really maybe helpful to get you thinking outside of the academy. And I believe, and she included a link to the SPPS website too.
I need to get that out of the chat. That sounds useful. We have a similar list for physics, by the way.
What's that?
We have a similar list for people looking for physics jobs. Actually, from data, we have a list of employers who have hired physics graduates, and that's actually published on our website. So that's what I mean by being an applied sociologist. You actually get to help people with your data. So,
Rachel, what have you found in terms of dialoguing with academic sociologists about your career path and your the nature of what you do now? Have you found that there's much dialogue or that there's a way to bridge the gap? I mean, I think a lot of us have experienced that within academic sociology, there's a big question mark about what people who are sociologists outside of academia do, outside of the ivory tower. And I wonder if you've engaged in that in any way, if you put any energy toward that, or if it's something that you feel, other things just take a higher priority.
I have some, but it hasn't been it's been priority for me off and on. One time I went to a physics meeting and I met a sociologist who had done a study of awards given to physicists, to see if she was interested in the gender gap in awards, for scientific research. And I encouraged her to publish in one of it's not my companies, but the main professional society for physicists is the American Physical Society. And I encouraged, she wrote an article for their newsletter about her research results on, gender differences in awards that society was given. And I've, occasionally, once at the ASAs, I organized a panel of sociologists where we talked about working outside of academics. I've done things like this, but it kind of comes and goes. I haven't really tried to work across the aisle, to use Washington, D.C. speak. I'm open to it, but especially, when I was doing more management at my company, I just didn't have a lot of time. So I think it's great. I've been a member of the ASA since I was in grad school in the 80s. I think it's great. I'm a member of the section on sociological practice. And so depending on if I have time, I look at those things. I'm probably more separate from academics than other applied sociologists are. A lot of applied sociologists actually work in academia, but I don't. And I think it's unusual, to be in my position and still be a member of the ASA, but I just love sociology. I can't quit it.
Well, that's great to hear. The discipline, benefits from that. We have just a few minutes left, so I want to encourage people to add questions to the chat if they haven't yet done so. And in the meantime, Rachel, I have another question I wanted to ask you about. So in this audience, we have a number of people who are educators, whether inside academia or outside academia. And I wonder, particularly for those who are inside academia and are involved in the training of both undergrads and or graduate students in sociology, what do you think is the best set of tips, or maybe best single tip? Essentially, what would you advise for people who are in a position to improve the training for up and coming sociologists with an eye toward, non-faculty positions? Like, how do you think training programs could improve?
That's a great question. And we have hired several BA level sociology majors who work with me, and they're absolutely fantastic. There do seem to be differences in the local universities in terms of the training. We really look for people who can, have some idea of, who've taken research methods. Again, here's my emphasis on research methods, but I do think that employers are interested in it. Part of doing interviews at that level, we in the past have handed people a piece of SPSS output and said, please interpret this chart. And it's like a 2x2 table with a chi-square on it. And you'd be surprised at how many people can't figure out what's supposed to be the independent and the dependent variable, right? Like something that's, like gender, which we would ordinarily look at as an independent variable. They don't know which way to read the table. So I think people at the bachelor's level, we are looking for people who have not necessarily quantitative skills, but methodological skills. Like, can they use some statistics package? It doesn't matter which one, because when you learn how to write the script that transfers to other script-based programs, and I don't know, there must be something at the University of Maryland. They seem to be able to teach their undergraduates research methods really, really well, and those people do good at the interviews. For the graduate level, again, I don't know. I haven't given a lot of thought to how could people change graduate training. I don't know. It probably would have benefited me to have a class or some admission on the part of my graduate department that some of us might work outside of academics. We actually had a class at Chapel Hill on teaching, which we were required to take before we could teach our own class. What if we'd had, a class or some sort of seminar series on, or had a speaker once come who wasn't a professor at some other university? I mean, that could have been a lot. It could have helped a lot of people in normalizing the experience of being a sociologist who doesn't work in academics. I never saw such a person when I was in grad school. So, and my own advisor, who I mentioned briefly, had worked outside of academics. She never talked about it. So,
as if it was shameful.
I guess I doubt that she was ashamed of it, but I never heard her talk about it in class. I mean, we talked about it one-on-one. And when I got my non-academic job, she reminded me that she had done that. I was like, oh yeah, you did. But it just wasn't a topic of conversation. So, I know sometimes the physicists bring in people who work in industry because, at least half of physicists they work outside academia. And so sometimes those departments will bring in physicists who don't have academic jobs to talk to the students. And I think that could be helpful.
I think also one thing to think about is that, academic institutions, historically at least, and I think still currently, have been ranked, or departments rather, sociology departments have been ranked according to the academic placements that they have of their graduates, which is their incentive, beyond the fact that that's typically what folks know best, but they've been incentivized then to focus their graduate students' career trajectories toward similar non-academic positions. Academic positions, faculty positions. And
Yep.
So I think that is changing as things are starting to change, as things open up, that there's prestige and recognition and excitement about non-faculty positions now, but it's slow to change. These institutions take a long time typically to change, disciplines take a long time to change. So, but I do think that we're at a moment where we haven't been before in the profession, where where there is more incentivization and interest and recognition in beyond the ivory tower. It looks like there's been there's kudos, Rachel, and thanks to you in the chat. And I hope that any remaining questions that didn't get to be addressed today that you won't hesitate to reach out to Rachel. And I just want to thank you, Rachel, again for sharing your insights and spending your time with us today. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to all of you who have attended. And I hope you'll continue to tune in for other SPPS and or other AACS offerings. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for coming. I know you're busy and I appreciate your attention and your questions.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.